All right. Want to touch a little bit on, and we're getting near the end now, and we're getting to the point where pretty much we've talked a lot of bit about everything, and we always stress the part where we're talking residential property, residential, and I keep saying that there's all kinds of other commercial property. Well, office property, you can manage office property, and most of the same strategies apply. And I'm going to use all those same strategies in all three of these. And what I mean by that is market analysis. It works pretty much the same on all of these. Figure the market by calling around. Now, there are companies that you can buy reports from, like LoopNet, Xceligent, some of the bigger Cushman and Wakefield. They might buy an office. They might have created an office report for the second quarter of 2015. And you might be able to buy that. That'll talk about the absorption rate, which is the amount of vacancy going off market. Understand what I just said? It's the amount of vacancy going off market. So the absorption, how much is the market? So you can actually buy some of those potentially. Look around, Google it, find I hate to say a mentor that can help you. Same thing with retail, property, industrial. A lot of these companies, what's the one I'm thinking of? Reis, R-E-I-S. There's another one, Inman. They all will probably do reports. I'm sure Cushman and Wakefield, if not Marcus and Millichap, will do reports on industrial property in Marion County. So that can give you an idea of the market analysis. It'll tell you, hey, in our, we did this poll and this study, and they have all the statisticians that are going to tell you what the average market rental rate is for an A property, B property. And don't forget, in the office property, if you really get into this, I would suggest you take a sister course to this called Intro into Commercial Brokerage, because we deal a lot more in dealing with the commercial portion, which will help you out in the management. Like, for instance, office property comes in usually Class A, Class B, Class C offices. And Class A offices are the big, well-represented properties like Cushman and Wakefield and Industrial One and all those kind of, and all the way down to the C office properties, which are usually off the beaten track, need a little help, maybe a lower market rate. That may be where you guys start out as a Class C property manager in the office world. So still should qualify your tenants. You should still do the same thing. You also have issues with fire and safety on these as well. You do with residential as well, but theoretically, at least in my mind, a tenant knows how to get out of their own apartment. This might be a situation of an office building where there's plenty of exits and employees that maybe need to be trained and make sure your exits are marked and fire extinguishers and all kinds of other stuff. Retail shopping centers kind of play out the same way. Is it an anchored shopping center like Kroger? Is it a grocery store anchored? Is it a mom and pop? Mom and pop is a term that I think people just use like a colloquialism, which usually means it's not tenanted by any kind of national chain. Now, that's not always true, but typically what you see is a 5,000 square foot broken into 1,500 square foot little strip centers, and you've got a barber, then a little accountant, and maybe a deli shop. You certainly don't have Macy's and a Subway and a Pizza Hut in there. That's typically a little step above the mom and pop. Not to say that you couldn't, but I'm just telling you they do, okay? Other things with retail properties that are kind of interesting is a lot of times tenant mix, who's in there. That may dictate whether you can go in or not. You might want to think about that when you start managing properties. The example I used in the other course, which is something you would have to be aware of, is if you signed a lease with a Subway franchisee, their lease, even though it's technically your lease, their lease is going to require, or a portion of their lease is going to require that they get the exclusive right to sell sub sandwiches, that there can be no other sub shop in there. Well, that's okay unless you've got a vacant spot and all of a sudden you want another sub shop that's willing to go in, and all of a sudden you say, I can't do that because of the tenant mix. There's all kinds of other issues that we could get into. Are the tenants here gross leases or net leases, and how do they back bill, and how do you know that someone's making the money? I did a deal with an owner that owned a building, and Marsh was the tenant, Marsh Supermarket, and they had to be audited by a big national chain so that the landlord would, quote unquote, take their word for any of the problem, for the amount of money they generated. I have seen property managers take a participation piece. Yeah, so, that's called, sure, we just talked about it earlier, on a different, it's one of the leases where they pay a percentage lease, or participation. The property manager participates in the business, i.e. if it goes up, since they get a percentage, their pay goes up. Still have safety issues. Industrial properties by their nature are just older, usually dirtier, less option oriented than Class A office space, more functional. Once again, you can seek outside help for reports from LoopNet, Xceligent, CoStar. Those are just three of the big MLSs that are in the commercial world. So you still got maintenance issues in industrial property, and that may involve or roll into environmental issues. And typically that's why you see industrial property is broken out different right here than, say, industrial properties broken out different than the retail and the offices put together, usually in the commercial zoning, okay? Usually in commercial zoning, and that has its own zoning of industrial, mainly because of the environmental issues that come with it. I think I found a new toy, although it kind of hampers me walking around when we're having a discussion. There's also industrial properties, I guess now probably, well, except retail probably does not have this issue. Office space, industrial space, security, and I mean by access to the actual facility. Most industrial properties have big high fences around them because they don't want people to get on, since there's usually a lot of environmental outside storage of equipment, chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, all that kind of stuff that's going on with that property. So retail space usually does not have limited access because they are dealing with the consumer and they want the consumers to actually show up. Okay? You got security. You could have patrol cars in industrial properties since there's a lot of space. You might have patrol cars in office areas if it's an office park that you're doing. They also have what they call campus style access. Campus style just is you drive on and off like a high school or college campus. When I was in Fort Harrison, it was a campus style fort. There were no gates that you stopped at to check in when it was there. So those are all kinds. Then you've also got some specialized properties in here, like storage units might be an industrial property that's specialized, mini storage units. And with that, you've still got access issues there. Is it a carded access? So it's 24 hours, but someone's got a card. My last storage unit, before I got married, I had a storage unit, was like that. And it worked very well because if you did not pay on the first, no lenience, your card got deactivated, so you couldn't get in to get your stuff, and you most certainly couldn't get in after hours because it was all locked up. All right? So managing property management of commercial properties tends to be a little different than residential, but a lot of the basic characteristics run the same. All right? If you have any questions, help@myrealyou.com. Otherwise, you guys looking good. I know. Tough it out, dude. Tough it out. We got just a couple more minutes. We can handle it.